Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Vasyl Lomachenko took to his social media, posted this image with a caption that reads, "I have my back. I leave no room for doubt. 2021, I can't wait to."
Can't wait to what?
Well, Vasyl Lomachenko is choosing to leave that to the imagination, though the inference we can make is that he can't wait to return to the ring. If he's talking about anything, he's talking about that. And, my sentiments, they really haven't changed. I feel that at some point, Vasyl Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez are going to share the squared circle yet again. Though, I don't imagine that's going to be the very next thing we see. I do imagine that at some point this year, towards the end of it, that could very well be the case. But in the in-between time, Vasyl Lomachenko has to come back. He has to rebound off that decision loss to Teofimo Lopez, which begs the question, who does he do it with?
Neither guy is leaving the lightweight division.
Teofimo doesn't seem to be going up to 140 pounds just yet, and where I half expected Vasyl Lomachenko to drop down to 130, that doesn't appear to be the case either.
They're both staying at lightweight for the time being.
And it is becoming more and more obvious that what Vasyl Lomachenko wants, and what he needs, is a second chance, a second outing against Teofimo Lopez. The question is, how does he get it?
Teofimo doesn't want to give it to him.
Not willingly, not as a voluntary. Not that Teofimo really could, because Teofimo's all entangled with this current IBF situation. The IBF has ordered the George Kambosos mandated title defense. Teofimo's got to fight that guy or cough up the red belt, and I don't think that Teofimo is about to do that. I don't think that Teofimo is going to surrender the IBF lightweight title to George Kambosos. So that situation requires reconciliation. It needs to be ironed out. While that's going on,
maybe Vasyl Lomachenko can line himself up for a title shot.
Even if the IBF route is currently closed to Vasyl Lomachenko because the mandatory slot is occupied by George Kambosos, and even if the WBC version of the title that Teofimo holds, even if that version of it doesn't actually come with any mandatories, there are still two other avenues of opportunity that Vasyl Lomachenko can traverse, can peruse to become one of Teofimo Lopez's mandatory challengers. In the WBO's last set of rank standings, the November rank standings, the December rank standings have not been uploaded yet. Vasyl Lomachenko occupies a very cushy spot at number 2, whereas at number 1, we see the name of George Kambosos, but we just talked about George. George is already the mandatory challenger via the IBF.
And if Teofimo takes care of him,
by way of the process of elimination, guess who moves into that very cushy WBO number 1 spot? Vasyl Lomachenko does. I could see a situation taking place where Vasyl Lomachenko maybe takes on ranked number 3, Denis Berinchyk, or ranked number 4, Emmanuel Tagoe, in a WBO final eliminator for a mandatory shot at one of Teofimo Lopez's titles. In this case, the WBO title. While Teofimo takes care of his IBF situation with George, Vasyl Lomachenko can be working to get in line for a title shot of his own to secure the rematch that Teofimo doesn't seem to want to give him willingly.
That's via the WBO.
Via the WBA. The situation is a little bit more convoluted because the WBA passes out titles, trinket titles, like candy to trick-or-treaters on Halloween. But it is a situation that can be negotiated. We know that Teofimo is the full-fledged WBA super champion. Gervonta Davis is the regular champion. Not much chance of Vasyl Lomachenko securing a fight with that guy. Rolly Romero, he is the WBC's interim champion.
So what?
And just like with Davis, there's not much chance of Vasyl Lomachenko being able to get that guy in the ring. We know what side of the street those two kids are on. That leaves the WBA gold champion, Ivan Mendy. And I think that Vasyl Lomachenko, if he wanted to, pull some strings, he could get Ivan Mendy in the ring and fight him for that WBA gold title. Gold title that perhaps could be used as a segue to fight for the full title. That's not all, folks. Vasyl Lomachenko's options for his ring return and what opponent he will face, they're not limited to, just fighting guys in the WBO's rank standings or the WBA's rank standings. One must also consider that Masayoshi Nakatani, he's still out there. He just gave Felix Verdejo quite the shellacking. A very entertaining fight. I could go for a Lomachenko versus Nakatani fight, I could. Former IBF champion Richard Comey is set to be facing Jackson Marinez next month on the 13th. Perhaps Vasyl Lomachenko could see about fighting the winner of that fight.
All three of those guys are on the rebound.
All three of those guys were dished out defeats in their last professional bouts. It's just that when it comes to Jackson Marinez, it's a lot more contentious. That's the same Jackson Marinez that Rolly Romero, who we just talked about, the WBA's interim champion, that's the same Jackson Marinez that many people will tell you Rolly Romero robbed in broad daylight. Better still, Jackson Marinez, Richard Comey, they're going to be locking horns next month, and perhaps Vasyl Lomachenko can see about fighting the winner of that fight. Vasyl Lomachenko's got options. Even if who he really wants is Teofimo Lopez, and even if he can't get him in the ring just yet for a rematch, there are other avenues of opportunity that put him closer towards, getting that fight. I'm very much looking forward to Vasyl Lomachenko's 2021 ring return. I'm very curious as to who he's going to fight and what's going to happen after that. In middleweight news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Chael Sonnen has named Gennady Golovkin as their top target for Chris Eubank Jr. He also said Ryota Murata, Liam Williams, and Kell Brook are fights he'd like to make, though Eubank Jr. may have a tune-up first. And some of those fights are actually very intriguing propositions. Some of those fights actually make for genuinely good matchups. Entertaining fights, they do. But not all of them are very realistic. For starters, Kell Brook, I don't see that happening. I don't see Kell Brook returning to the middleweight division for a Chris Eubank Jr. fight. Not at a time when Eddie Hearn may be working behind the scenes to finally deliver that long-awaited Amir Khan grudge match. Did you guys forget? That's what they've been talking about the last couple of days, last week or so. And if Kell Brook is going to be doing anything in the near future, he might be doing that. I don't see Kell Brook going up there to fight Chris Eubank Jr. They also mentioned Liam Williams. Liam Williams versus Chris Eubank Jr. makes for a sensational fight. Both guys are action guys. Both guys are high-octane fighters, high-octane punches. Both guys throw a lot of punches, a lot of volume between them, and both are very aggressive. But the fact of the matter is, Liam Williams is in a pole position to either fight Demetrius Andrade for the WBO title or pick it up once Demetrius vacates it. Because he might. Demetrius Andrade might be making his way to the super middleweight division. And if he does and doesn't satisfy his mandatory challenger, guess who becomes WBO champion? Liam Williams. That's who. Maybe the WBO so decides to simply elevate Liam to champion, or maybe they have him fight someone in their rank standings for the title. Someone like, Jaime Munguia,
Yanni Bekalam Kanuli,
or Kanat Islam. Pick your poison. But because Demetrius Andrade seems to be targeting Billy Joe Saunders for his very next fight, that means he might move up to super middleweight. And if he does, the title he holds at middleweight, it might go vacant, making Liam Williams champion as a result. And because that's what's in play for Liam, I don't see him having any kind of an excursion with Chris Eubank Jr. in the near future. So even though I like the idea of Eubank Jr. versus Williams, I don't think that's a very likely fight to happen. Not anytime soon, anyways. The Ryota Murata fight is a lot more realistic because Ryota Murata was just elevated to WBA super champion, full champion in the middleweight division. And it just so happens that Chris Eubank Jr. is the WBA's interim champion at that same weight. And that being said, there's not a lot between them. There's not a lot between Ryota Murata and Chris Eubank Jr. There's no WBA gold at this weight and no WBA regular. There is, put simply, Ryota Murata holding the full version of the title and Chris holding the lesser version of it. A fight between them not only makes sense, but it can be made. Chris ain't with Matchroom or PBC, at least not anymore. That's the side of the street he was on before he climbed into bed with Sarlin Promotions. Sarlin Promotions, who, in many ways, is Switzerland.
neutral.
In this very political boxing climate. They're neutral. They can work with Matchroom. They do. They can work with Top Rank. They can work with Golden Boy. They can work with the premier boxing champions. And it's because Sarlin doesn't have a U.S. broadcaster. I mean, they're a very capable promotional outfit, but they don't have any of the rifts that we see with other, promotional outfits that are out there. The rift that Top Rank has with the PBC.
Yeah, no.
So if the question is, Can a fight between Chris Eubank Jr., the WBA's interim champion,
Right.
and Ryota Murata, the WBA's full champion at middleweight, can a fight between them take place? Is there anything by way of the promotional outfits or the sanctioning bodies that could stifle a fight between them, that could get in the way? The answer is no. The only thing that could stop these two guys from fighting is
each other.
if somebody doesn't want to. Like I always say, it takes two guys to make a fight, but it only takes one to fuck it all up. If Chris and his people want to fight, but Ryota's people don't, well, there goes the fucking fight, and vice versa.
But it could happen.
I view a Ryota-Murata fight as being a more feasible fight that's more likely to happen than, say, a Kell Brook fight or a Liam Williams fight. The name of Gennady Golovkin was also mentioned, and I have mixed feelings about how possible or impossible that fight might be, how likely or unlikely. We know these two guys were supposed to have fought a long time ago, and the long and the short of it was that the Eubanks fucked it all up. They fucked up the fight, and that's why Kell Brook ended up standing in. They wanted control of too many things in reference to the fight that made the fight a no-go, made it non-negotiable. Several years later, Chris Eubank Jr. has Gennady Golovkin in his crosshairs. But given that Gennady Golovkin, here today, his name is attached to a potential Jaime Munguia fight set to go down on Cinco de Mayo of this year.
Well,
That Triple G might be booked, that's one hindrance, and that Chris Eubank Jr. hasn't fought in 12 months, that's yet another hindrance. I don't think this guy, off of 12 months, over 12 months of inactivity, I don't think he would fight Gennady Golovkin straight away, not under those circumstances. So even if the fight can maybe be finagled, I don't think it gets finagled next. I don't think it's the next fight we see. I don't see it happening in the near future.
because Chris needs a tune-up.
He hasn't fought since December of 2019, the Matt Korobov fight. It's the last time that guy saw any action. The whole of 2020, he didn't get out there. He didn't get the chance to have a fight. And a lot has changed since then for Chris. He's now being trained by Roy Jones Jr., Roy Lavesta.
Hey.
He's left PBC Island, and he's now going to be fighting under the Sarlin Promotions banner. All things considered, this change of ambiance could be beneficial for Chris. It could. Seems like Chris was wasting away over there on PBC Island. They just weren't keeping that guy as busy as they could have. So let's see what 2021 has in store for young Chris Eubank Jr. And finally, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has revealed that Alexander Povetkin versus Dillian Whyte 2 will take place on March 6th. If he wins, Hearn wants to make Whyte versus Deontay Wilder this year. And listen, that's just a lot of wishful thinking. It is. If Dillian Whyte manages to avenge the loss to Alexander Povetkin, there's no guarantees whatsoever that Deontay Wilder will fight his guy. There just aren't. You know, Wilder's been out of commission since February of last year. And here today, we know more about who everybody else is going to be fighting and what everyone else is going to be doing in the near future than Deontay Wilder. We still don't know who Deontay Wilder's next opponent is going to be. Deontay Wilder's fans themselves, they want to be in denial about things. They still want to believe that Deontay Wilder can hold Tyson Fury to their rematch agreement.
Rematch clause.
Even though all the news coming out seems to indicate that Joshua versus Fury fight, it's going to go down, and it's going to go down this year. Eddie Hearn says he's 90% confident the fight happens this year, and Bob Arum very recently said he's 95% confident, 95% sure the fight happens this year. We'll discuss that even further in another video, but better still, it doesn't look like Wilder's going to get the chance to fight Fury for a third time in his next outing.
And he's been out of commission since February of last year.
February of this year is fast approaching. We're halfway through the month of January. Wilder hasn't made his ring return, obviously, and you know, we're not quite sure. There's nothing concrete out there as to when he is going to be returning and who he is going to be fighting, though the safe assumption is it's going to be one of his stablemates. It's going to be someone on PBC Island, and in all likelihood, once Wilder has his much-needed tune-up fight, in all likelihood, that's what it's going to be. Once he has that fight, they'll probably move to start building an Andy Ruiz fight for Deontay Wilder. I'd sooner believe that Deontay Wilder fights Andy Ruiz 2 fights from now than Wilder fighting Dillian Whyte at any point in his career.
Or Alexander Povetkin, for that matter.
I don't see Deontay Wilder fighting the winner of that fight under any circumstances. I just don't. I can say that, Povetkin, he fucked it up for himself because him and Ryabinski, they had Deontay Wilder pinned down. They did. Most people might not remember that Andrzej Ryabinski actually won the purse bid to stage the fight in Alexander Povetkin's native Russia. And if not for that meldonium scandal, Alexander would have got his shot. He would have got his opportunity. Alexander, in many ways, fucked it up for himself, and in many ways, he fucked it up for Dillian, too, when he knocked him out.
Yeah, he did.
Deontay has never been all that receptive to fighting either of these two guys, either Dillian Whyte or Alexander Povetkin. Deontay Wilder's supporters might cite,
Ped stuff.
Alexander's history of ped use, that he tested positive for meldonium, and afterwards, he tested positive for Osterin. Dillian Whyte's snafu, that whole situation with an adverse finding. This is what Deontay Wilder's fans would likely try to use as an excuse, as a reason for Deontay to not fight those fighters. Yet Deontay Wilder was perfectly okay fighting Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz, who had some banned substance scandals of his own. Once in 2014 after the Latif Coyote fight, the Nandrolone, and then again ahead of his own fight with Deontay Wilder. Did they forget the fight got postponed because Luis Ortiz tested positive for something? Deontay Wilder also had no aversion to facing Tyson Fury, who had his own banned substance scandal with UCAD, the Martin Carefoot wild boar situation, all of that stuff. Deontay didn't have any aversion to fighting that guy. It seems that Fury's sketchy history didn't seem to matter to Deontay or his fans until after Tyson Fury beat him. How convenient. But all fuckery aside, I don't see Deontay Wilder fighting the winner of that fight, regardless of who the winner is, whether Dillian Whyte wins or Povetkin wins. I don't see Deontay Wilder fighting the winner of that fight under any circumstances.
They'll give him a tune-up and then push for the Ruiz fight.
Which I don't even think is a bad fight, by the way, but that's what I'm expecting to happen. The PBC can't afford to spare Deontay Wilder at this point. We just talked about Chris Eubank Jr., who left the shores of PBC Island for the comforts of Sarlin City. It also seems that they've lost Manny Pacquiao as well, as Manny Pacquiao's focus is on a Conor McGregor crossover fight. So they don't got that guy either.
They're not going to loan out Wilder to Matchroom.
No matter what they put on the table for Deontay Wilder, no matter what they offer him, they cannot afford to spare Deontay Wilder. Wilder's no megastar. He's not. And he's no pay-per-view attraction. Not on his own. Not by himself. But I'd wager that his ring return, that is going to get a lot of attention because of all the attention his excuses got post-fight after the second Tyson Fury fight. So believe you me, Wilder's staying put. Wilder's not going nowhere.